stories are very important for children's development as well. I've been just as interested in storytelling as I have in art.
Why should we write children's books? What is the importance of storytelling? And once you've got your book written, should you self-publish or go with a traditional publisher? And how does Mitchell Toy, the celebrated Australian children's book writer and illustrator, create his breathtaking pictures? Let's hear what he's got to say. I'm super, super excited to have Mitchell on here. I've been admiring his work on Instagram for a long time. His combination of imagination and realism and incredible use of color, and the way his illustrations are so like expansive and detailed and like magical. I'm just a very big fan. So I'm really happy that you came on here.
Thank you for that kind introduction.
Yeah, a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. And Mitchell's in Australia, so he's woken up early for us this morning. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm curious to know if you have been drawing and painting all your life, or like how you came to that. Have you been working as a professional artist for a long time, or is it more recent?
I worked for a newspaper called the Herald Sun, which is in Melbourne, and did that for 10 years. But during that time, I felt a need to keep going with art and to keep practicing. And it often bubbled up into what I was doing. And around the time when, in sort of 2010, when there were lots of staff cuts at that newspaper, they were looking for people to take on more graphic design, court sketch artistry, and paper illustration. And I was able to take some of that up while I was also being a news reporter. But more and more, the pull towards, especially writing children's books, became a lot stronger. Eventually, I stopped working at the newspaper and took up doing children's books, which I've been doing for about 5 years now. But at the tail end of my journalism career, I was also doing a lot of painting and practicing, and I suppose trying to get my illustration style up to scratch for that next part.
Your children's books are self-published, correct?
Well, the first one I did, which was called The Midnight Tram, I've done 6 now.
Wow.
The first was in 2019, which I self-published in Melbourne. Then I had a publisher for the next 3. Was it 3? Yes, it must have been. Yeah, for the next 3. But I found that having a publisher's got some very strong advantages. Their distribution's obviously a lot better. I found, however, that the lack of creative control was too much for me. So this year, I effectively started my own publishing operation which published this year. This year just gone. 2 more of my books, and we'll do 2 more next year. So it's been a wild ride, sorting that out and figuring out publishing and so forth. To me, the strong advantage of having a publisher is the distribution channels. I surprisingly didn't find the marketing as good as I expected with a publisher compared to when you can do it on your own. I think you can leverage it a lot better, especially if, like me, you take a local content strategy where you're making books that are really suited to a local area. And down here in Melbourne, Australia, we have a tramway system similar to, say, San Francisco or other places in the world. And 2 of the books that I've done in the Midnight Tram series really leverage that local, what's a local icon. And so you can get them very popular in an immediate area if you know that you're only distributing locally. Yeah, it works if you're doing it on your own. It works just fine. Publishers will take it a lot broader, but they'll also want to make a lot of compromises to the content, which often creators aren't necessarily willing to make. Right. So there are advantages and disadvantages here.
Right. And so tell me what the draw for you is to illustrating children's books as opposed to using your art for other forms.
Oh yeah, no, that's a really good question. I'm not precisely sure. It's something I've always wanted to do. I think children's books are very important for children's development. Stories are very important for children's development as well. I've been just as interested in storytelling as I have in art throughout my journalism career and so forth. And I felt a pull towards it that I suppose I can't really explain. But C.S. Lewis said, if you want to tell a story to adults, the best way to do it is to tell it to children first. Children are more open to artistic symbology. They're closer to the waters of creation, you might say, and they often interpret narrative and interpret art much better than adults do. They certainly notice a lot of things in stories and details in illustration that their parents never do. And I'm able to have conversations with 7-year-olds about children's book that go a lot deeper than ever any conversation I've ever had with a publisher, for example. So I really enjoy it for that reason, I think.
That's so interesting. I always feel like when I'm making a children's book, well, so far I haven't published any of my own that I've written. I've just illustrated for other people, but one of my goals is really to work on writing and illustrating together. And I feel like it's just as much for the adults as for the children.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've always had a very strong connection with children's books and very nostalgic. And I have a deep love for all the books that I grew up with that I try to pass on to my own kids.
If you ever go through a box at the back of the cupboard and you find the children's books that were your favorite in childhood, it brings back a lot, doesn't it? Really. A lot of memories, a lot of feelings, and it's a magical thing, really.
Absolutely, I agree. Okay, so I have one more question for you, and then we can get started with your presentation. I'm curious to know, right now you work digitally, and I find that a lot of times the best digital artists have also experienced working with traditional medium, and so they understand how colors mix and how textures are made and things like that. So did you work?
Yeah, definitely. There was a period for I always used to draw in colored pencil. Then before iPads became as good as they are now, I would use pencil or paint or Photoshop on sort of a desktop, which using a tablet and so forth was a bit tricky. There were a period of a couple of years up to 2019 when I just did painting, acrylic or oil painting, just to practice that and to sort of settle in my style, which takes a long time, as other artists may know. I found, though, that moving on to digital was a bit of an adjustment, but now I think it would be a bigger adjustment the other way. I'm so used to using Procreate on iPad Pro, which it's such a schmick application, and it's such a pleasure to use that I'd have trouble using anything else now, I think. It was also made in Tasmania. That's a shout out, to any other Australians who may view this. Tasmania, as you might know, is part of Australia. It's a little island right at the bottom. Is fewer than 500,000 people live in Tasmania, and they've produced Procreate, which has become the one of towards the standard for illustration these days. So we're all very proud of that, of course.
That's cool. I didn't know that. All right. Amazing. Okay, so is there anything else that you want to add before we jump into the presentation that you think will be good for people to know before we start, or are we ready to go?
Oh, look, I think we're ready to go, except to thank you very much for having me and for everyone to joining.
Yeah, thank you.
We can jump in if you like.
All right, let's go. You can buy Mitchell's books and follow him on Instagram and Facebook. You'll find those links in the description below. And if you want to learn more about Mitchell's illustration process, check out part 2 of this interview. Mitchell shares some of his secrets for choosing colors, creating light and shadow, and how to combine colors for incredible effects. See you over there.